Yo, what's up? Cody here. In this training today, we're going to go through how to scale a portfolio from 7 to 8 figures, recycling your money with a focus on value-add real estate. I don't mean syndication, not split amongst a bunch of different partners. I mean properties that you actually own yourself. So I have hyper-specific trainings on how to underwrite deals, how to price units, and things like that. But today, we're going to go through the entire process, start to finish, on how to find a unit, build your team, and actually buy a deal with a focus on value-add real estate. So if you're watching this, I'm assuming you're either looking to buy or you already do own some real estate. So most people right now are struggling to find good deals and find ways to create value in the space, and this training is going to really focus in on how to solve those problems. And if you're wondering why should you listen to me, over the last 5 years, I have bought over 50 units using this exact system. And I didn't come from money. I didn't have a lot of financial literacy. Honestly, when I first started on this journey, I was broke and had no clue what I was doing. And I know a lot of the gurus out there that you see make it sound like you're going to buy 1 or 2 deals and retire rich, but unfortunately that isn't the case. Unfortunately, that's just a lie being sold by them to get you to buy their courses. So today when we go through this training, you'll kind of get to see behind the veil all of the difficulties and hardships that can come with building a real estate system, but realize that it's not that hard if you're intentional and consistent. So the reason this system came about was when I first started on my real estate journey, I found myself working 80 to 100-hour weeks, perpetually being burnt out with no work-life balance. And I knew something was going to have to change, or I either was going to have a heart attack or I was going to have to give up and not be able to continue investing. So after some hard self-reflection, I kind of realized I was operating my business in a way that just didn't make sense. And I wasn't prioritizing not only a work-life balance, but I wasn't being intentional enough with my underwriting and deal flow. So I was buying deals that weren't making me enough money to build the system and lifestyle that I wanted. So after a lot of continued education, hard self-reflection, and some trial and error, I was able to develop this system that put me on a path to buying over 50 units in the last 5 years, being able to drastically increase my net worth, retain cash flowing assets, and be able to recycle a lot of my seed money while going through this entire process. So at its core, the value-add system that we've developed boils down to 3 basic steps. First of all is build it, which is build out your team, meaning you want to have a quality agent, lender, and contractor that knows how to work with investors, that you can avoid a lot of the common pitfalls that come with being a new investor, saving you tens of thousands of dollars in mistakes, and making sure you have peace of mind while you go through these transactions. So the second step in the process is actually finding deals. So what we do is we go through our deal funnel building system to make sure you have an inflow of deals coming to you that are not only undervalued, but distressed in a way where you can get them at a good price to make sure you have a ton of potential value on the back end with an ARV after renovating and increasing rents. And then the third step is obviously to actually buy the deal. So we'll go through the process, start to finish, what it looks like to actually buy a deal. So like I said, the first step is to actually build your team. So we want to find an agent, a lender, and a contractor that knows how to work with investors to make sure we have people we can lean on as we go through these processes. So first, an agent is the cornerstone of a real estate business. The reality, especially when you're starting, you're not going to understand how to comp really well. Underwriting deals is going to be difficult. There's going to be a lot of market intricacies that you're not going to understand until you get a lot of reps in. So by finding an agent that knows how to work with investors, you're going to be able to traverse this in a way where you're not going to make near as many mistakes. And the way to find one of these agents is you're going to reach out to your local network of other investors and find agents who are actively working with investors. Not all agents work with real estate investors, and if you try to work with one that has no experience working with a real estate investor, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of gaps in their knowledge, and it's going to cause potential problems for you. So we're going to continue to lean on these investors that you've reached out to and networked with to figure out who they're using for a lender. So a good lender is not only going to be able to find you good products and the best rates, they're going to be able to make you aware of any potential roadblocks that are going to be in the way of financing for you after evaluating your financial situation. And they're also going to be able to make sure they can get you financing in a timely manner. Also, working with a lender that has worked with investors before, they're going to have a lot of insights that other lenders aren't going to when it comes to specific products, depending on the type of deal you're doing. For example, the type of product that you're going to look at is more than likely going to be different if it's a single family, if it's a single family you're going to occupy, if it's a small multifamily, if it's a small multifamily you're going to occupy, if it's a larger multifamily, if it's a flip, etc., etc. Different products apply to different types of properties. And if you're working with a lender that understands what it's like to work with an investor, they're going to have insights into which product is best depending on the deal you're doing. And beyond establishing a relationship with this lender, I also recommend reaching out to a couple of your local banks and establishing relationships with them as well. Just sometimes having those relationships with a local small bank especially can provide you some alternative financing options for deals that are a little outside the normal purview. So, the third person we need to network with and have on our team is a good contractor. And once again, leaning on these investors that we've connected with, we want to figure out who they're using for their properties. So, you want a contractor that understands the price and time sensitivity that comes with real estate properties, because a lot of people in construction that have never worked on investment properties don't understand those dynamics, and they're really prone to over rehabbing and unfortunately overcharging and taking too long, and it just doesn't work and slows your processes down and costs you a lot of money. So by making sure you figure out who other investors are using, so you know that you have a contractor that's familiar with these processes, you're going to be able to save a lot of headaches, save a lot of money, and save a lot of time. And also, depending on your skill level and how involved you want to be in this process, we see a lot of people earlier in their investing career kind of take a hands-on approach and they get involved with either some paint, some flooring, some more entry-level renovation facets. If that's something you want to do, that's great. YouTube is a great resource, and I would never fault anybody for wanting to take a hands-on approach. But even if you are taking a hands-on approach, you still want to make sure you have this connection with a quality contractor, because you are going to encounter problems that you cannot solve yourself, and you want to have someone that understands what it's like to work on these investment properties so it can be taken care of when that time comes. So now we have our core network of people that we're going to work with, we need to figure out how to actually find a deal. So when you're earlier in your investing career, things like direct mail or online advertising can be really intimidating and potentially really costly. So to start, we recommend an aggressive networking approach to develop a deal funnel. This approach will allow you to find undervalued off-market deals. So deals still can be found on multiple listing services, but we found they're usually overly competitive and overpriced. So by building out a deal funnel like this, we can maximize our returns as much as possible by finding these off-market undervalued deals. So the first step in this aggressive networking model to be able to build your deal funnel, you're going to reach out to local real estate agents. I know it can be uncomfortable, but this has worked a ton for us in the past and has led to a ton of deals. What you're going to do is you're going to call all the major real estate offices in your market. You're going to ask to speak with the person that deals with multifamily and or investment properties, and you're going to introduce yourself and tell them what your buy box is. So for example, if I called in and would say, "Hello, my name is Cody. I am looking for any small multifamily properties that are heavily distressed or have some value add potential. And I want you to put me on your buyer's list. And I want you to know that I am pre-approved and I am actively looking to buy something and I will execute." You want to make sure these agents know that you're the type of person that is actively looking and will close and will follow through with what you say you're going to do. And honestly, it doesn't take very many transactions until you develop a reputation where if agents know that you're going to show up and look at a deal, you're good to work with, and you're actually going to close, where they will start bringing more and more deals your way. So even though we're really well established, every couple weeks, I still go on Google. I still look for new agents in the area. I call them and introduce myself to them, so I'm on their radar and they know they have a potential buyer if they have any deals like this that come in their pipeline. So after we've developed a relationship with a ton of different agents in our local market, we're going to move on to the next step, which is reaching out to wholesalers. So wholesalers do marketing and find sellers who are actively looking to sell their homes. A lot of times it's people that have properties that are in a distressed state. And then the wholesaler then facilitates connecting those people to investors like us. You will have to pay an assignment fee to a wholesaler when they bring you a deal, but they can generate enough value, it really doesn't matter. If you can find a property that's $50,000 under market value and you have to pay a wholesaler $10,000, it's worth the transaction cost every single time. And we actually buy a large portion of our deals through wholesalers just because it saves us a lot of time and energy on the marketing side so we can really focus on what we know how to do, which is the value add real estate. So the third step is networking with investors. And I know we already started this a little bit when it came to the conversation of finding agents, lenders, and contractors, but we're going to do this in a little bit of a different way, trying to establish some deal flow. So first, all investors you've already made connections with, make them aware that you're actively looking for deals. They might not have anything they're looking to sell, but they might be able to connect you with other people that are. And when time comes for them to sell, more than likely you're going to be at the front of their mind. We've had multiple investors that we established relationships with years ago that reached out to us first when the time came for them to sell their properties because they knew that we were actively looking and that we were a quality operator and that we could be trusted to take care of their property. Beyond having those conversations with investors that you've already met with, start calling for rent signs, especially bandit signs. If you see signs out in people's front yards, especially if they've been there for a while, a lot of times it's a sign that a person's having difficulty renting their unit, and a lot of times it means the landlord is potentially tired. When I had first started, I called almost every for sale sign I saw in my market, and it led to multiple really good deals. And once again, I know it can be uncomfortable, but if you approach this in the right way, where you make sure people know, hey, I am looking for properties and I'm looking to actively buy. I was wondering if you're interested in selling your property. Even if you get a no, establish a relationship, introduce yourself to make sure you're in their mind. So when the time comes for them to sell, you're potentially one of the people they call first. So beyond for rent signs and yards, when you're driving around town, keep an eye out for properties that look heavily distressed or really run down. There's a lot of third-party services that exist out there, like PropStream, for example, where you can actually look up who owns those properties and you can connect with them and see if they're interested in selling. Just because a lot of times if you see a property that's really run down or really distressed, there's garbage sitting outside, anything like that, it's usually a sign that the landlord is tired and or can't keep up with the property. And a lot of those people are very open to selling. And the common nomenclature for this process is driving for dollars. Whenever I'm driving around town, I have a notebook or I also have a note on my phone where I just keep track of any addresses I see that kind of fit this constraint. And I know all of these things can feel really uncomfortable, but I promise if you can get out of your comfort zone and do some of this aggressive networking, it is going to lead to deals. One of my best deals to date, fun enough, was actually I was driving past a property and I saw somebody that was throwing garbage away out of a unit in this fourplex. And when I saw this, I actually stopped and went and introduced myself to the person that was taking the stuff out of this unit. And it turned out it was the owner of the building. The unit had just been abandoned. It was left full of garbage, and he was having to throw it all away himself, and he was incredibly frustrated having to deal with this. So after hearing him vocalize his frustrations, I actually made him an offer then and there. I said, hey, you don't have to finish cleaning out this unit. You don't have to deal with these other tenants. Let me take over this problem for you, and you can wash your hands of it. So the number I threw out to him was actually about $50,000 below market value, and I couldn't believe he took it. But I just happened to be there at the right time and the right place when he was extremely frustrated and didn't want to deal with the headache anymore. So I know you're wondering, why would somebody sell a property for so much less than it's actually worth? To be honest, a lot of people just get tired of properties and tired of headaches and want to wash their hands of it. We see it all the times, whether it's having to evict tenants, clean up garbage, deal with any of the problems that can sometimes come with owning properties. A lot of these older landlords, and especially landlords that are poor at managing their properties, they get stuck in these positions where they're flooded with headaches and they just want to get out from underneath it. So there definitely is a little bit of luck when it comes to finding good deals, but I promise if you do enough of this networking and make enough connections, you will get lucky eventually. And depending on your investing goals and how quick you want to scale, beyond these three things that we listed, there are other pathways for additional marketing and deal flow, but we're not going to go into that training today just because that's not a part of the module that we've developed. So depending on your goals and how fast you want to scale, there are other marketing options beyond the three that we just listed that you can pursue, but they aren't a part of this system. All right, so now that we have the people that we know we're going to work with, we've done our networking, we have a deal flow coming into us, now we need to go through the process of actually buying a deal. So from a 1,000-foot view, the process looks like this. First, you want to figure out what your buy box is. So are you looking for a single family rental? Are you looking for a small multifamily rental? Is it a property that you're going to live in yourself? Are you looking for a mid-sized multifamily? Figure out what it is you want exactly based off of what your financing is and how much you want to take on at that time. And after you've established your financing and what you're pre-approved for, and you've figured out what this buy box looks like, you need to start pursuing and underwriting deals that are coming into you so you can see what's worth going to look at in person. And after you've found a deal that you think looks good, that's when you're going to connect with your agent and you're going to look at doing showings on those properties to actually do walkthroughs and take a closer look at those properties. And after you've done walkthroughs, if you like the deal, that's when you end up making an offer and you sign the final paperwork and you go ahead and you close on the deal. So to do a deeper dive into the process, first we'll start with what we call our buy box. So when you're really trying to figure out what kind of property you want to start with, it depends on not only your goals, but your investment horizon, how many units do you want to own, and how involved in the process you want to be. So sometimes the limiting factor can be price point in your market. Sometimes it's whether or not you want to live in the property. Sometimes it's how much of a headache do you want to take on, depending on what your full-time job looks like. And after you have a good idea of what you want that buy box to look like, you need to make sure you go through with your lender, your financials in totality, so you can figure out exactly what you're pre-approved for and what kind of products they offer that match the buy box you're seeking. So as you have deals come into you that you find that fit your buy box, you want to start actively underwriting all of those deals. And I actually do have another video on my page that does a really deep dive on what this underwriting looks like. But as a basic breakdown, this kind of looks like this from a 1,000-foot view on the underwriting process. You want to take your gross rents, less your mortgage, taxes, insurance, which is also known as PITI or PITI, which stands for principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. You want to subtract any owner-paid utilities, HOA fees, or assessments. And then you want to subtract an additional 40% of gross rents. And I know that number feels huge for an expense ratio, but I promise we've owned enough units over enough years that number has held true over time. And that expense ratio includes things like capital expenses, maintenance, vacancy, management, and a little bit of a slush fund to cover other things like accounting, marketing, softwares, and things of that nature. So if using this underwriting formula, it looks like the property cash flows and or meets what you want in terms of your investing horizon, you want to reach out to your agent and go ahead and take a look at the property. So after you've connected with your agent, you want to go to do the walkthrough. I always ask for permission to take ancillary photos before I go in. I think it's really valuable to be able to snap photos of additional items that might be concerning to you so you can take a look at them when you do your hard underwriting after you leave the property. And as you're walking through this property, kind of look at it through the lens of what is the current value? What are the current rents? Can the rents be increased based off of its current value? Or if I did a little bit of renovating, what could the rents then be? And always be cognizant of the layout of the property, the size of the units, and the current quality of finishings, because those are going to be the main things that drive the rent values for this property. And as you're doing this walkthrough, depending on your knowledge and skill level, you want to try to be cognizant of the large ticket items that you see if it looks like they're in disrepair or they need to be replaced. Things like a roof, windows, siding, furnace, AC, things of that nature. If you don't have that knowledge base, just go ahead and lean on your home inspector for going through those things. So after you've done the walkthrough, you've taken into consideration all of these items that you've seen at the property, you want to do a re-underwriting process to take a deep dive into what could the current rents be in its current state, what could the rents be with a little bit of renovating, and then do kind of a comparison of potential value that's there at the property. Because remember, as we've said in other videos, every $100 of rent that you can increase on a property leads to about a $10,000 increase in valuation. And as you're going through this underwriting process, we always recommend that you do your own due diligence on any numbers that have been given to you by the seller, just because sometimes sellers lie, misrepresent, or even make a mistake when it comes to listing things like taxes, insurance, utilities costs, assessments, anything of that nature. So while you're going through this underwriting, this is where the value add process really shines. So we're looking at these distressed, undervalued, under-optimized properties. What we're really looking for is properties where the renovation costs are minimal and there's a ton of potential upside with optimizing these rents. So just to use a recent deal we did as an example, we bought a duplex for $130,000 where the rents were really below market value, and to be honest, the units just needed to be deep cleaned, have a little bit of flooring replaced, and needed a little bit of paint. So when we were underwriting this deal, the current rents were at $1,300. We knew we could roll the tenants, spend a couple $1,000s in each unit, and bring these rents from $1,300 up to $2,400. That means we increased rents $1,100 a month after spending less than $5,000 in renovations, and that leads to over $100,000 in increased net worth, an additional $1,000 a month in cash flow coming in just through light renovations and rent optimization. So if you like what the numbers look like after you're doing your underwriting, what you're going to do is you're going to reach out to your agent and you're going to make an offer on the property, and they'll be able to submit all the paperwork for you. And after you go through the offer and negotiating process, if they end up accepting it, you will be given a window where you're able to have a home inspector go through the property and do a walkthrough, which we always recommend because they'll be able to give you any insights if there's any large ticket items that you missed that might be on the horizon. Having someone that knows what to look for and be able to point out problems with a roof, windows, siding, furnace, foundation, things of that nature that are large ticket items is really invaluable. So make sure you lean on those investors and this agent that you're working with to find a home inspector that knows what they're doing, that can find any of those potential problems for you. And depending on anything that's found by that inspector, you can potentially renegotiate the deal, either asking for the seller to make a concession or drop the price, or if there's no problems, you can go ahead and move forward. Also, if the seller is not willing to capitulate in terms of bringing the price down or make any concessions, if there are any large issues, you do have an opportunity here where you can walk away from the deal and you will get your money back. So after the inspection contingency is done, if you guys have renegotiated, everybody's happy and they have an accepted offer, you're basically off to the races. So if the offer you want is accepted, all the paperwork has been signed, the agent will have you take care of anything else that's needed on your end in terms of filling out anything or signing any paperwork, and then they'll submit it to title to get the last of the work done. The title company will then reach out, be able to set a date with you to go in and sign the paperwork, and then you go in on that day and you do your closing. So after title has reached out to you and set a closing date, as that date approaches, you want to reach out to the title company and ask for a copy of any of the information before the actual closing so you can review them yourself. It doesn't happen often, but title companies can make mistakes. You want to make sure you review the information and everything is accurate, everything from the purchase price, the down payment, the money that was in escrow, any other specific details that are pertinent to it. You want to make sure they're clear and concise, and always make sure you get any prorated rents that come with the property, and always ask for security deposits and copies of leases to be provided. So if everything checks out after being reviewed, you show up the day of closing, you sign the paperwork, you get the keys, and voila, you're now the owner of a rental property and on the path to exploding your net worth and increasing your cash flow every single transaction. So if after this training, you want to take the next step and transform your life with real estate, putting you and your family on the path to financial and time freedom, click the link below, go to my Instagram and DM me the word wealth, where we can brainstorm a plan together and talk about what it would look like for me to work with you to put you on the path to scale a portfolio to 7 to 8 figures. And at the end of this video as well, I'm going to have a couple cards linked to other videos that do a deeper dive on some of the items we talked about in today's training.